Let's get ready to mortgage. He is the prince of programs, guru of guidelines, master of matrices. He puts the fun in funding. Please welcome Mark, Mr. Mark-eitel.
All right. Yep, my name is Mark-eitel, and this is the Mr. Mortgage Show. And you, my friend, are in the right place if you want to walk away from the next hour with the data and the information that you need to make better real estate and mortgage decisions for you and your family. And there are a lot of articles floating around, a lot of data, a lot of headlines about real estate and mortgages. I mean, it was another interesting week. The Federal Reserve early in the week announced that they are most likely, I guess they didn't announce it. Let me rephrase that. The Fed minutes were read and deciphered, and it looks like we're in for some 50 basis point increases for the next few meetings. So no surprise to you if you listen to the show or follow us on Facebook, but it was newsworthy because a lot of people are concerned about what that's going to do to housing. And we're going to cover that in this show. So sit tight. We are definitely going to get to that because I think it's counter to what a lot of people believe is going to happen. So I do want to touch on that. But again, my name is Mark-eitel. This is the Mr. Mortgage Show. We're going to cover that and a lot more. If you have questions and you want them on the air, I encourage you to either call or text them to 561-291-8569. That's the Anytime hotline. That number again is 561-291-8569. I almost slipped and showed my age and said fax that number or fax your questions to that number. But anyway, call or text 561-291-8569, or you can send them to us through the website. There's a contact us box, and you can fill your question out there. A lot of people are more comfortable doing it that way, and the website address is www.mr.mortgage. That's mr.mortgage. And if any of this interests you and you want a deeper dive into the data and the reports that we use each week during the show, you'll be able to find those on the Facebook page. Just go to Facebook and type in the Mr. Mortgage Show, and we'll pop up, and all of this data will be there. Usually when we finish the show, I start uploading all the articles to the Facebook page. So with all that out of the way, let's jump right into this week's show. We mentioned there were a lot of interesting headlines this week, and I wanted to share one common conversation that seems to be swirling around right now. And a lot of people are looking to the government for solutions to housing. I mean, California right now is considering a 25% penalty tax on people who sell an investment. Actually, I think it's any property, but when it first came out, it was going to be for property investors. But if you sell the property within 7 years, there's up to 25%. And then as I read the proposed legislation, it steps down from the first couple years at 25%. But nonetheless, I mean, that's a huge penalty to pay for selling a piece of property when selling property right now is the problem, meaning there's not the inventory out there to meet the demand. So I wonder if, as well-intentioned as that piece of legislation may be, it may actually be counter to the problem and make it worse, because if you discourage people from selling properties for at least 7 years, logic kind of dictates they're just going to hold those properties and rent them out, which is going to bring less resale inventory to the market. So I find that interesting, and oftentimes the case with legislators. Their intent is to do the right thing, but they're not deep enough in the trenches and understand the problem well enough to make those decisions. So we're going to watch that and see what happens, but it's interesting that they're thinking that's the solution to the problem. Another thing that's been commonly thrown about is, a government grant for first-time home buyers, which is awesome, right? It's going to give them the down payment that they need to make the purchase. My fear with that is it's just going to increase purchase prices even more rapidly in that first-time buyer's market, because suddenly people are going to have the ability to buy that previously couldn't. But that might be a good thing. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. But here's an idea. How about if we cut taxes so that people have more spendable income at the end of the week, the month, the year? Because right now, as things become more and more expensive, income has been pinched more than ever before. And I found this interesting. I pulled an article from the Realtor.com website, and they talked about the lowest tax rate per state, and they had a list of the top 25 lowest taxes, and they took into consideration property taxes, sales tax, and income tax. And Alaska was number one which I found that super interesting. Wyoming was number 2. New Hampshire was number 3. Nevada was number 4. South Dakota was 5. And Florida was number 6. Tennessee, Washington, Texas, and Colorado round out the top 10. Now, in that list right there are 3 of the hottest real estate markets in the country. So that kind of dictates logically that lower taxes are more attractive, and it leaves you more of your income to use to buy real estate with at the end of your paycheck or your pay cycle. So I throw that out there. Maybe trimming taxes could be a start if the government wants to get involved and help people become homeowners. And it always becomes a topic around my inner circle, if you will, when we see these rapidly appreciating property cycles that we're in now, just like we saw 15, 17 years ago, that all of a sudden there's a very large, I don't know what the term I'm looking for, but falsely created tax base, if you will. Suddenly the house that was $200,000 taxable sells at $600,000, and now the tax rate on that property is reset at whatever, $500,000 after the exemptions. My point is, that household of 3 people in that property had no more demand on the resources of the community than the new 3 people that lived there, yet the tax base just doubled. So what you typically see is, municipalities are going out there and leasing new equipment for their workforce, and the building department suddenly has brand new trucks. And yes, they may upgrade a park and, fix some of the infrastructure of the city, but it's never in direct proportion with the giant increase in taxes. And somebody's going to argue to me and say, well, what about new construction? They're adding people to the neighborhood, which is putting a burden on those infrastructure pieces that you just mentioned. Yes, in that case, there's what's called an impact fee that is part of the permit process, which is supposed to offset those 3 new people that are coming to the community. So I always find it interesting when we go through these appreciation spikes, what the municipalities do with all of that newfound tax wealth. And perhaps cutting taxes is somewhere that the government could look to make it more obtainable, homeownership more obtainable for a larger portion of the population. So I just throw that out there. There was another super interesting article. I'm going to touch on it now, and we'll dive deeper on it during the show. But it was the National Association of Realtors 2022 Trends and Outlook. And they've been doing this since, I think it's 2013. It's pretty interesting to look at the last, 9 or 10 years of the data. But they break all of us up into the age group. So we've got Gen Z, which is the 18 to 22-year-olds. They made up just 2% of both buyers and sellers, which is, you don't expect an 18 or 22-year-old to be participating in real estate yet. Awesome if they are, but, it wasn't surprising to see that number. Millennials making up the age group of 23 to 31, which they're calling younger millennials, and then the older millennials, 32 to 41-year-olds, they make up the largest growing share of home buyers at 43%. So I found that interesting, and that breaks down to 25% of the younger millennials and 18% of the older millennials. So that's a big portion of our buyers is that age group. As they're growing, their families are growing, they're growing professionally, they're out there, they're making up a big segment of that first-time buyer market. So super interesting. I'm going to post this on the Facebook page because I find a lot of the information in this interesting, and we'll dive deeper into that article during the show. But I just wanted to touch on it because we do post all this really great data in the Facebook page, and it goes to show you that the headlines alone aren't where you're going to find the answers. You really want to deep dive this data, because as we go through this article this week and we answer all your questions, I think you're going to find that there is far more demand in the market than supply, despite the recent increase in interest rates, which, oh, by the way, interest rates have stabilized over the last couple weeks. So I think the shock and awe of the initial interest rate jump is over. So we will be right back after this quick break. We're going to take 2 minutes and be right back with you on the other side of this. Hey, it's mark-eitel here, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. And you've heard me talk about the valuation tool that we use in our lending practice almost daily. It's not quite an appraisal, but it's way more accurate than one of those online estimates. And we're happy to run one of those reports for you at no charge. Just visit freevaluereport.org. That's freevaluereport.org. Give us a little information about the property, and we'll be happy to send you your report. That's freevaluereport.org.
Here's another 5-star review.
My wife and I own a small business. And the way our accountant file our taxes, we don't show much income on tax returns. Because of this, it looks as if we don't make the money. This was a problem for our bank when we applied for a mortgage. But not for Mark. He verifies our income by using our monthly bank statements. Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team made a big difference for me. Yes, I am happy to recommend Mr. Mortgage Mark.
Hey, it's mark-eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com, www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now, 561-291-8569.
All right, we are back, and my name is mark-eitel. This is the Mr. Mortgage Show, and you heard the announcer, 561-291-8569. 561-291-8569 is the anytime hotline. You can call or text your questions to that number. And Dom, my producer, is manning that question line, so we will get your questions answered right here, right now on the air. So I encourage you to do that, 561-291-8569. So I held up the article that I was referencing before the break to Dom, and it looks like a telephone book. And I'm not going to go through it because it is, I don't know, a couple hundred pages of data. And I'll post it up there for you on the Facebook page and let you kind of dissect it yourself. But I want to quickly touch some of the highlight points, and then I'm going to dive into your questions. So as I mentioned, Generation Z, which were the youngsters 18 to 22, made up just 2% of the activity. But millennials, which they're calling that group 23 to 41, made up the largest portion of home buyers at 43%. And surprisingly, the majority of those were first-time buyers. So I found that interesting because that age group is broader than I expected. I didn't realize that 43-year-olds were still millennials, making me feel old. But anyway, so that was fascinating. I mentioned that the first-time home buyer stat there. I'm just flipping through this real quick. They were also the largest portion of the married couple buyers at 64%, and they're moving up or moving out of their apartment as their family expands, and you'll see that in the article. They were also most likely to move directly from a family member's home, so check that. I might have that data wrong. Looks like they're moving out of mom's house and jumping right into their first home. Convenience to job and commuting was a big concern for them, and then the Gen Xers, which is 42 to 56, consisted of 22% of the market. So I'm not going to go through the rest of it because there's a ton of data there. But the reason I'm sharing this is there is still a tremendous amount of activity in a very large portion of our population that has a significant income. The most active members of society that are buying right now are also the highest earners. And they have less student loans than I anticipated. It was between $28,000 and $35,000. So student loans may be less of a problem than the news would have you think. So the reason I'm sharing that is if you're in a neighborhood and you're thinking of selling and your home is attractive to a younger family or a growing family, or you're in a neighborhood that might be attractive to someone who's older and